Welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today we will be interviewing Russ Charvonia of the Masonic Civility Project.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we have our usual group of hosts. We have Brother Craig Graham from Kalamalka Lodge number 160 in Vernon, BC. Very worshipful Brother Stephen Chung from Prince Charles number 153 in lovely Kelowna, British Columbia. Very worshipful Brother David Colbeth from King Solomon 60 in Auburn, Washington. And I'm Matt Appel, and I'm a member of Mill Creek 243, and we meet in Montlake Terrace, Washington. And we have the honor to have with us today Russ Charvonia, who's a past Grand Master of California in 2014 and 15, founder of the Masonic Civility Project, and founding president of the Worldwide Civility Council. Most worshipful Brother Russ, thank you for being on the show. We appreciate you coming.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you.
So for those who are longtime listeners of the show, we're on season 8 now. And way back in season 2, if you want to go look them up, episodes 42 and 43, and fact check Russ and see if he, changed his story any since then. You can go back and listen to we had a previous interview with him, and we just sort of figured it's been a few years. The topic of civility has come up more than once in our conversations with on the podcast here, and we wanted to bring you back and see where things stand, where the project is, how things are going. So, I guess, being as folks may not recall, we'll sort of start off more generally. What brought you to Masonry? How did you become a Freemason?
Well, I became a Mason in 1992, and up until that time, I had known nothing about it at all. My now wife, the lady I was dating, Linda at the time, her father was Grand Master of Masons in California in 1982, 83. And as we were dating, he would schlep me to all these Masonic affairs. And after we returned from a Scottish Rite event one night, Linda and I were in the back seat. He was driving, and my mother-in-law was in the passenger seat, and pulled up in front of his garage door. This is pertinent to the story. Put the car into park, and I said, "So Harry, what does it take to become a Mason?" If that car was not in park, I'm convinced it would have gone through the garage, through the house, back out with the petition before I knew what hit me. And my goodness, it's been an incredible experience in the intervening now 33 years. Nice Masonic number there for us.
That's terrific. And what led you to be Grand Master? You just did you? But I'll just leave it at that. What led you to become Grand Master? What led you down that path?
It's often said you don't seek the office seeks you. And that was certainly the case in my situation, where never in a million years ever even imagined that it would happen. And we do things a little differently than most jurisdictions here, where we have a committee of all the past Grand Masters and current Grand Lodge officers, the elected officers, that is, and then representatives from our 9 different divisions. And they get together and they consider different people to recommend to stand for election as Junior Grand Warden. And I was that person and received a phone call from the then Grand Master. And I have to say, I was quite shocked. And a couple things ran through my mind at first was, holy cow, how am I ever going to follow the footsteps of John Cooper, the Grand Master that I would be following? I don't know if you know his name, but he's quite the Masonic scholar and left some very, very big shoes for me to fill. And then the next thing was, how do I balance work and my home life and raising the family and so on? But it was an experience that my wife and I will forever treasure, primarily because of the great brethren and their families that we met throughout our travels. And that's frankly why I'm involved with you always. So my travels throughout the Pacific Northwest.
Interesting. So, and then did you start with the Civility Project while you were Grand Master, or did that come later?
Actually, the year before, and this is, I hope, an interesting story for you and your listeners. John Cooper, who I just mentioned, he and I were in the executive committee meeting. He was driving me back to San Francisco Airport, and he was going to be the chairperson for the Conference of Grand Masters that year in Baltimore. And I'm in the back seat again. Boy, things happen in the back seat. Get me in a lot of trouble. But
That could be interpreted a couple different ways, but yes.
but we're not going there, Matt. Um, but I said, John, you're chairman of this conference. We're looking forward to it. But it strikes me that, the conferences I've attended, it's great to see everybody, but we have 800, 1,000 people there who can really change the shape of masonry. And it seems the biggest decision we ever make is where we're holding the conference 3 or 4 years hence. How about if we use this opportunity to really stand for something? And he says, well, what do you have in mind? I said, oh, I don't know. I said, the world about us is becoming increasingly uncivil. Neighbor can't get along with neighbor. Keep in mind, this is 2013. I said, if you think about the core of Freemasonry, it's, in my mind, really about learning how to better treat one another with dignity and respect, if you will, with civility. How about if we talk to the delegates there about using our Masonic principles and language and so on and so forth to try to turn the tide of incivility that society is facing? And we just kept riffing on it and going down that rabbit trail, if you will. We talked with his committee, and we had an incredibly effective conference that year. And I'll go into a little more detail if you don't mind, because I think it may be helpful for your listeners. So keep in mind, this is now February of 2014. If you can just think back to what the state of the world was at that time. And I made a presentation in the plenary session, and then we broke into, if you're familiar with the World Cafe, it's a way of gathering information input from a lot of different people. And we had about 600 people providing input as to what this civility effort might look like. And then a number of us holed up in our hotel room that night, and we took what we learned and we formulated a resolution to present to the committee, to the conference the next day. And this resolution I thought was pretty, well, we use the expression apple pie down here, okay? It contained two parts. The first was we would all agree to commit to being more civil in our own actions. Who's going to object to that, right? The second part was we would form a civility task force through the Conference of Grandmasters in North America. And initially, we would try to focus on two things. One is we would build a civility toolkit. So a set of resources where people could go when they just are at their wits' ends, they don't know what to do. And the other was, since Masons have served for centuries as conveners of other groups and people, we would do that in the civility realm. We would try to gather other groups that are trying to restore civility in their own way, in their own spheres. And frankly, none of them were meeting with very great success. And we would see if we could be a catalyst to help them get there. So that was the resolution. We'd all be more civil in our own behavior. We formed this task force. The task force isn't asking for any money from the conference delegates. And we put this to the floor. And the conversation, you've all seen it in your Grand Lodges. The conversation is, yep, this is the greatest thing. We ought to do it. It's supportive. And John Cooper is the chairman. I'm begging him, please call for the question now. Please, please, please. But of course, being the gentleman that he is and the proper presider, he lets it go on. And then that point we've all experienced in our lodges, our Grand Lodges, wherever, where that conversation, the train just goes off the rails. All of a sudden, some brethren started opposing it. And I couldn't really ascertain what their objection was. The nearest thing I could really figure is that they were saying that we're supposed to keep what we learn in the lodge within the confines of the four walls of the lodge. And I don't think that's really what they meant, but that's how it was coming across. All right, so there were 60 voting Grand Masters around the table. To pass this resolution, you need 2/3. For our math whizzes out there, that means we needed 40 yeas. We finally call for the question. We have 30 yeas. We have 20 no's, which means we had what? 10 who didn't have the guts to raise their hand one way or the other. And those are the folks that troubled me. stand for something. I don't care if you oppose it, but stand for. So it failed. I go to the corner of the ballroom after John gavels the meeting adjourned. I kind of raise my hand so everybody that worked so hard with me sees where I am. And they come over and they said, "What do we do now, Russ?" I said, "I propose that we set up a task force. We build a civility toolkit and we try to put together some kind of convening." And we ended up doing all of that and so much more that I'm sure we'll be talking about throughout the session. So that was the genesis of what then became the Masonic Family Civility Project.
And what is what is the Masonic Family Civility Project
Yeah, it has since morphed into what is now much broader than just Masonry. And it all falls under the auspices of the Worldwide Civility Council. And worldwide is, in fact, worldwide. We have people working this effort across the globe. But basically, what it is it's receiving training on what our Masonic principles, tenets, values, language, symbols say about how to treat people. We didn't come up with anything earth-shattering with this whole civility. We just landed on the umbrella word for all of our Masonic values. Nothing original under the sun, right? Under Ecclesiastes. That's an umbrella word that really does a good job of covering everything to do with our Masonic teachings. And by the way, our Masonic youth orders as well. I've sat down with members of our Job's Daughters, Rainbow for Girls, DMLA, and had them talk about their precepts, their values, and they're able to tie most, if not all of them, to this concept of civility. So that's really what it is all about. And I'm sure we'll share this website later, but if folks go to masoniccivilityorg, masoniccivilityorg, you'll see the presentations that we put together both for inside a lodge and outside in our greater communities. And these are not passworded, they're not locked in any way. The idea is that people can download them, get familiar with them, and then do these presentations in their own walks of life. We realized that if we can just get 10% of the Masons embracing this concept, we can change the course of the world. And I think most of us listening today will agree that the world needs to be changed. It needs to be repaired.
That's a good point. I had a question for you, Russ, because you came to this a number of years ago, and it was something that appealed to you. You said the civility is declining. That's a bit general. Was there anything at that time, or when you were getting really interested in this, that was specifically, needling you or bothering you about what was happening in the world at what time of the world it was, that really pushed you forward into this?
Yes, I think it was the demonization that I was seeing happening, particularly in the world of politics. Because Americans are so US centric, I thought it was a uniquely American problem. And I realized real quickly that it wasn't, our brethren in Canada are, you never face incivility in Canada. My goodness, they're the ones that are, fearing it every bit as much as we are. And then, Serbia and Israel and Mexico and Germany, and my goodness, was a worldwide concern at that time. And in fact, we actually started this effort thinking we needed to tackle this from the top down, try to convince our leaders to treat each other more civilly and the voting populace, and then that would solve the problem. And we realized within a couple of years that was a fool's errand. We weren't getting anywhere with that. And so we then shifted to more of a grassroots effort. And if you're going to ask me, Craig, how do things compare now to 2013 or 14? This isn't meant as a cheap, shameless plug of my book, The Civility Mosaic, but if you read chapter 1 of my book, it starts off as dystopian.
Okay.
And that book came out 3-4 years ago, and it's getting more dystopian than even I wrote then.
Yeah. It's almost like it's the myth of Sisyphus, isn't it? It's you're pushing a stone up the hill, and at some point it's just going to roll right back down, and here we go again.
Sometimes I think I'm flying too close to the sun too.
Watch those wax wings. Yeah.
A whole different myth. Yeah.
Yeah.
That said, why are we still doing this? And this isn't just a Russ effort by any means. This is a whole lot of other folks that are working harder than I am at it. Um, I can't tell you how many times I thought my time, effort, and money could be better spent on something else because I feel like I'm failing miserably in restoring civility to society. And about the time I think, okay, that's it, I'm hanging it up, I'll get a phone call or an email from somebody who say, Russ, something you shared way back when helped me in this instance. And that's what keeps the fire stoked.
Mm-hmm.
Are you actively, or do you have stories, I guess, of your ambassadors or other folks that are out in the field now, active in the last year to 2 years, or even up to 5, that you could relate at all, that would help to identify and connect folks? We like to think that there's people all over the world watching the show, but we do have some international watchers, but and thank you for all of those that are. But even we're growing, but there it's for even from our own interest. Is there how is that working? I know I looked at the website, and first step is become an ambassador and access to resources. And so if I said, okay, I'd like to be an ambassador, what does that mean? And how can I utilize the tools? Or do you have some stories of examples that are out there?
Yeah, I'm going to take this in a couple of pieces, if I may, David.
Please.
First of all, numerous stories of how our efforts have helped to preserve relationships, one-on-one relationships. I'm absolutely convinced we have saved lodges, which is all about relationships, of course. And then, yes, we have several success stories in helping communities, greater communities, be it workplaces, be it our cities and our towns, our houses of worship, of being able to get over some real obstacles that they were encountering just by getting them regrounded in what really matters are these relationships, and how do we go about holding on to what is so dear to us. So that's the end result. That's the purpose of why we're doing this. How we're doing it. So we have been running the Masonic Civility Ambassador Program for several years now. We've been trying to get the Community Civility Ambassador Program off and running, and it's just been proven more difficult, but we're getting closer. We're getting ever closer. But the way I phrase the objective of the ambassador is that once they are trained in the program, they now know how to keep their ear to the ground for when something is brewing under the surface of whatever community they're in. Again, their family, their work life, their lodge, their greater community, or whatever. So they have the training that they recognize when something's starting to rip the community apart. And they then feel they have the tools that they can offer forth to go in there and try to mend it before it actually bubbles over and the relationships are irreparably harmed. That's the whole objective of the civility ambassador.
And so, going back to the website, if I were to go on there, and I mean, I did go on there, look, but if I was to go to the website, how would, if I was saying, oh, I want to be an ambassador, I think there's a link for clicking it to learn more. Is that going to take me to a form and I would fill it out and someone would contact me? And then do you have regular training that happens, or is it recorded that you go through a series and you get a special backdoor access that isn't there for the public, or how does that work?
We used to do it all in person or on Zoom, but now it is, I guess they call it asynchronous learning, where you can do it on your time frame. I apologize because most of the sessions are me, so you're staring and listening to me for hours on. But hopefully it's the message that gets through. 8 different modules, and you take them at your time, on your time. And there's quizzes at each of them, not serious quizzes, but just, make sure you're paying attention and grasping some of the key content. Once you've completed that, we get notified of it, and we will then just do a 10, 15-minute Zoom interview with the ambassador to make sure they're going to reflect properly upon the effort, make sure we've answered questions and so on. And then they have access to all of the resources. And more than anything, what they have access to is the group of us where when you're facing that challenge, you can call on us and we can help to walk you through some ways to try to address it. I have to have done certainly hundreds, maybe into the thousands of these presentations by now. I can do them with my eyes closed, but somebody that's doing it for the first time, I role play with them. What are we trying to really get to and resolve here? And I'm happy to help folks with that, as is the rest of the team.
That's great. Is there kind of a core, well, we call the worldwide community council or the civil civility council? Is there a certain number on the board, so to speak, or on the council, or how does that work? Or is it every ambassador is a member of the council, or?
So actually two different pieces, and I hope I don't confuse folks, but
Apologize.
the
Yeah.
Worldwide Civility Council is made up of about half Masons, half non-Masons. There's 8 of us on the board now, if I recall correctly, and they oversee all of our efforts. And during the course of this session, we'll talk more about some of those other efforts. The Civilian Ambassadors is one of the biggest ones. But we also have formed through the Conference of Grand Masters of North America a Masonic Civility Committee, and that is made up of representatives from many of the 64, maybe it's 68 now, different jurisdictions that make up that conference. And we're the ones that are getting this word out to the various jurisdictions and newsletters and things like that. So that's on the Masonic end. The WCC, Worldwide Civility Council, is Masonic and public.
So if you're an ambassador for the WCC, are you also kind of if you're a Mason, are you kind of all automatically part of the Masonic Civility then, or would you have to?
You're not on the committee itself,
Sure,
for which you should be grateful.
Yeah.
Part of, but you're deputized, and you go into a directory that if wherever you are, and we hear somebody that wants
Gotcha.
a presentation, we'll call on that ambassador in that area to do it.
Gotcha.
And one of the things we're trying to get really off the ground here is having our ambassadors share success with each other, as well as issues that have come up that they're facing, and as a team work on addressing those things. Because Craig asked, what was this like in 2013? It's changed so immensely during the pandemic and post-pandemic, and different government officials and so on, and we've got to keep evolving with it.
Just sorry to interrupt. You said something that made me think. So just for argument's sake, the city of Montlake Terrace City Council is up in arms against each other and not agreeing, and somehow someone in the Civility Project or the Civility Council hears this. Do we have an ambassador in that area? Well, yes, we have whatever, Bill Thompson, and you call up Bill and say, hey, you should go talk to the City Council of Montlake Terrace.
Absolutely. Or really the way it tends to happen is you live there. You're reading the newspaper, you're hearing the reports, you're witnessing it if you're attending the meetings and so on. And you're calling us and saying, hey, I would sure like to do something, because it's pitting neighbor against neighbor, and this is not going to turn out well if it's allowed to continue. And, so if we have that ambassador, we'll call up the city manager or the mayor or whomever. The public's not happy with this. We have some things that we can do to help your council figure out how to better communicate, still be vehement in their opinions. We're not trying to squelch opinions, but we are trying to help them to deal with each other and with us, the voting populace, in a more decent way. By the time it resorts to name calling or people storming out of meetings or whatever, it's broken down. And I'm going to take this a different tack for a moment. When we first started this effort, we thought the first thing we ought to do is define the word civility. Okay, we call ourselves the Masonic Family Civility Project. What in the world is civility?
That was going to be my next question. But yeah.
Good. Can't be that hard to define it, right? So a group of us, we're meeting once a month. We spent the first 4 meetings, 4 monthly meetings, writing and rewriting the word. I still have the definitions on my computer. It's interesting to go back and look at them. And I described it as trying to hold sand in your hand. It just nothing quite fit the bill. And then after 4 months of this futility, I did what I should have done from the outset, which is what? I Googled it. I typed the word into Wikipedia and typed the word into civility, and it said see incivility. And it was one of those aha moments. No wonder we're struggling defining it. It's one of those concepts we know what it is not more than we know what it is. And so we did, in fact, write a definition, submitted it to Wikipedia. Worshipful Brandon Lippincott from Southern California here carried the lion's share of that load. I don't know if you ever tried to submit something to Wikipedia, but it's nasty. I mean, they just keep rejecting and rejecting and rejecting. But we finally got it. And if your folks go into Wikipedia, type in the word civility and look at the footnotes, you'll see references to Freemasonry, even though it's been written and rewritten. But to answer your question, Matt, okay, what is civility? We know what it isn't. We know when we're experiencing incivility. I've had people over the years tell me it's just about being polite, applying the rules of etiquette, avoiding difficult conversations. And I've others say, no, it has nothing to do with that. It's having a basic level of dignity and respect for the other person so that we can engage in the difficult conversations we need to have. I think it's a combination. I mean, if it's all just being nice and avoiding difficult conversations, we're not ever going to get to deal with the difficult subjects that we have to be able to address. But we also can't say, oh, yes, I respect you and so on, and then I treat you poorly, because we're not going to get anywhere that way either. So that's why I say it's the combination. And further, I've had people over the years tell me, Russ, this period of civility and incivility is purely cyclical. Read back in history and you're going to see it over and over. And that's true. But I have two problems with it. First of all, is what would be wrong with us shortening this negative period if we can? Getting better is good. Let's do all we can. But my greater concern is that we're human beings. We fall into habits. And this state of incivility very well may become so much a part of our moral fabric, our social fabric, that it's going to take generations, literal generations, before we can have a chance to turn it around again. And where this really frightens me is with our young people. We all know young people learn much more from what they witness than anything we tell them. And if they see adults treating each other poorly, they're going to assume that's the way they should be acting as well. We have to stem this tide now.
You're here. I think we've about reached the end of our episode here for this go round. David, you look like you're about to tell me something.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. I'm waiting with bated breath, Matt.
Oh, good. Heaven help us. So, I guess first, Russ, thank you for being on the show. We appreciate it. We try to keep these to a half an hour or so. So, thank you, Russ, for coming back after 6 years of and joining us again. And to our listeners, thank you all for listening. And please feel free to again go back to season 2, episodes 42 and 43, and check out what was going on there, and comment and on our various modes that you can comment on. We're always interested to hear what folks have to say. And with that, on behalf of Stephen and David and Craig and myself, Russ, again, thank you for being here.
Thank you, brother. Thoroughly enjoyed.
And thank you all for listening to the Working Tools Podcast. Goodbye.